What's happening, everybody? We've had a little bit of a stream connection issue, and I apologize because you didn't get a chance to see that incredible introductory video, which was actually the song co-written by my next person I'm bringing on camera here. He's an amazing sponsor. You may know Five Star Guitars, based in Beaverton, Oregon, is the best guitar selection. They also have repairs and lessons. I've got in the shop right now talking about all the offerings that he has in Beaverton, Oregon, Mr. Joff Metz. Joff, how you doing, buddy?
So good. It's the high season here, and it's Christmas tree guitars, and I feel like we're in the himself. We're standing by now, taking care of all your guitar needs. But yeah, no, actually, it's really exciting. This is a fun time of year. So
I love it. It looks festive. I can see some of the other guys that are in the shop running around trying to get your attention. Let me ask you. You've been a huge supporter of the show as I've been the last couple of years as I've been going. We've talked a little bit about the offerings that Five Star has. One of the big things that you do is provide guitars and accessories online for people outside of Oregon, so there's no sales tax. So right now, as people are thinking about Christmas presents and that kind of thing, there's a link that they can go check out some discounts.
yeah,
5starguitars.com/all access live, and you can use the promo code of all access 15 to get 15% off what you see. But beyond that, I'll bet you've got quite a bit of other things that are available to people right there in the store.
there's a ton of cool stuff in right now. We did well, like in terms of place was packed, and I don't know, man. It's going good. Like the best year ever. It's been cool. I've been helping out people like all over the country, and again, so we don't take it lightly.
Yeah, fantastic, man. So, tell me really quick. One of the things that you had mentioned were some new things that Five Star has going on. I did a short introductory video where we got to take a look at a wide selection of guitars. We took a look at some vintage Gibson guitars that you had up there on the wall. What do you have going on right now for people that are interested in getting some Christmas gifts?
Man, all the stuff, but like we just became a Rickenbacker dealer, so like, dude, trying out like one of these. Oh yeah, that
Wow,
bass
look
over
at that, beautiful.
Yeah, but Gibson and Fender and Paul Reed Smith and so many more greatest hits. But yeah, and we dig the show. I'm actually excited to catch the rest of it. So minute, Merry Christmas to you and to Neff. Have a great show, man. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Hey, I know you've got a lesson to get off to, but I appreciate you being here. Joff Metz, thank you so much, buddy, and I hope you have a fantastic Christmas. Look forward to catching you soon. Thanks again for all your support.
Cheers. Thank you.
All right. Hey, so as Joff mentioned, my guest today is an incredible, dynamic personality. You may have seen her on the show just about a year ago, but she is the founder, a co-founder of an organization called Single Moms Planet. She also has this foundation where it's all focused on empowerment. This is a perfect time to do this. I've got all the way from her studio there, Neff Plessy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm grateful to have you here.
Nice.
One of the things that I just mentioned, we've got your neferteriplessy.com. I'm sure that's a place that people can find more information about you. But Single Moms Planet.
Absolutely.
Single Moms Planet, something that you and I talked about a little bit when you were on the show last time. And one of the things that I took away was how empowering you were for a lot of the women that got involved in your organization. And I know that this time of year is really difficult for a lot of people, especially families. I've talked to quite a few musicians who have said that their families struggled throughout the pandemic. As you get into holidays, this is something that's very difficult for a lot of people as they're gathering. So while we talk about empowerment, one thing I did want to mention to folks, and this is an important thing, and I don't mean to downplay this, I do recommend that there is this easy access number that if people are struggling right now during the holidays, they can call, and there's a crisis line right there for anybody somebody that needs help. It's a time where people feel alone, and you definitely are not alone. There are people there that can take this call. So I recommend that you keep that phone number handy. And if you are at all interested in knowing a little bit about empowerment and taking back sort of community, then they should know a little bit about what you provide here, Nev. So tell me, between the time you and I talked before,
Sure.
and now you got a lot going on this time of year, right?
We do, not just communicating with single mom families, right? Single mom or co-parenting families, just families in general. A lot of families are struggling right now. I think even, you have the suicide hotline up, just even having conversations, even with our children who we may think, like, oh, they're not thinking about that. It's good to just, find the right lingo or the language to use to have those conversations with our loved ones, not just only checking in on people, but maybe even having straight conversations with them. Not just like, oh, hey, how you doing? But like, how are you feeling? And I'm not an expert in that realm. So I don't want to give you the lingo to use, but definitely educating ourselves on how to have these conversations, because it's something that we don't want it to be a norm. We don't want it to be something that, we get used to. We want it to be something that we don't ever become numb to it, and we start to really have those conversations and support those that are around us with learning the right lingo and learning how to have those conversations, and meeting people where they are and not where we think they should be. Is something that I've been learning throughout the year, and even having conversations with my mom about, how we communicated with each other. Like sometimes she's like, oh, you'll be okay. And I'm like, I noticed that I would say that to my own boys, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Right.
Because I don't like when my mom says that to me. And I had to even go back to her and say, hey, you're the beginning of all this. We don't want to say to people, you're going to be okay. Some people are not going to be okay. Sometimes they're not okay. Something that happened, and it just shuts down the door for people to have a conversation with us when we tell them how they're going to feel about something.
Absolutely. It's very dismissive, and that kind of mentality.
Very dismissive. Yeah.
You talked about communication, and that is the big thing. I mean, not just about depression and the sort of seasonal thing. Right now, it seems to be a real, unfortunately, a prevalent thing, that families that are struggling in relationships, and so they are apart. And that's where we see a lot of people really challenged by this. So much of it comes down to communication. And you talked about talking to your mom and communicating about how she speaks about that, and being able to talk to our kids about depression. If I remember right, you've got a 15-year-old, right? Is that right?
16 now. He just had his 16th birthday. And then we have a 13-year-old. He'll be 13 in like a couple days. So, it is, I mean, having a co-parenting household, having split families, we definitely have to keep those lines of communication open, making sure that, what is one parent saying that maybe both parties don't agree with? How do we interact with our children? How do we interact with each other? Checking in with our kids and making sure that they really are okay. And even even if you have an ex, making sure that they're okay as well. How are you feeling? You need anything? Did you eat today? Because sometimes we're working and we are taking the kids places. And my boys, they're older now. They're with their dad the majority of the time at this point. They're growing into young men. So if I'm thinking about, their health, I'm also thinking about his as well. He's a major part of their life. And so we want to really just have a heart. Sometimes we have to set aside maybe, why we didn't get along or why things didn't work out. I mean, that has nothing to do with, the core and the heart of like who we are as humanity, and reaching out to people and really being there. What does really being there look like for us? And so even throughout this whole year, and even as we've been getting closer to the end of the year, I've been really looking at, how do I want to show up as a woman? How do I really stand for my family? How do I stand for my loved ones? And it may not necessarily look like how it used to. How do we rewrite the next chapters so that we actually show up, you know, in integrity, and we show up as someone of our word. It should look different. It should be evolving.
You know, I'm glad to hear you say that too. There was something that I took away from the last conversation we had about um, people's sort of their vision of themselves, you know. And I think I wrote it down. Let me see. One of the things that you had mentioned, I thought this is fascinating. You said that um, if what you want to create doesn't scare you a little bit, then what you're creating is too small right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with self-worth and what we've sort of told ourselves about what we bring to this place, and what our we also talked legacy. But I think
Yeah.
what what our position is, what our value is on this planet. And you know, I thought it was fascinating the way that you talked about the incorporation of both with your family, and then also, you know, taking in the empowerment part and taking it into the foundation you work with as well. So um, let's go back a little bit about self-worth, and people that don't know, the conversation that you and I had last time was amazing to me about um, and if it's okay, you maybe tell a little bit about the story where you mentioned that you had an abusive relationship with your dad, was abusive in the household. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Mom took you away in the middle of the night, all the way across the country, got out of New Orleans and off to the West Coast, right? And so you had some family support there, but that fear that had to have accommodated that is so similar to what people have gone through, and so many people don't have the strength to walk away or the family connections. And so I think let me tell me a little bit about that story, and maybe and how you've then carried that story into the conversations you've had with women to get them out of that situation they've been in.
Definitely. So my mother and father were definitely in an abusive relationship, and it wasn't a thing that happened overnight. I think it was progressive. And from what she communicates around when I talk to her about it, is it was more so mental and verbal than it was necessarily physical, but it wasn't healthy. And there was some, you know, alcohol and drug abuse involved as well. So she knew that she really had a plan. You know, my father was a fisherman, and he would go out, and she would, you know, he would send her money and she would save the money. And she really was saving money to really remove us from the situation. And she actually recently told me the first time she packed up everything and left and she came back, she ended up leaving again. And when she left the second time, she never came back again. And so it's one of those things where, you know, my grandmother, her mother had passed away about a year prior to my birthday. My grandmother passed away on my birthday
Oh my
the
God.
year prior, and she had breast cancer. And so my mom was really making big girl decisions. You know, sometimes it's like, okay, it's time for me to grow up. Today's my day, right? It's like, I'm an adult. You know, even sometimes when we have kids and we go off and we start relationships, you know, sometimes we still feel like that adolescent in the inside. You know, we're still making choices or decisions that aren't necessarily, you know, the best for our future self. And so there's moments in life where we have to really make decisions and say, okay, I'm pressing the gas on this. I'm going to take the action. And my mom really attributes it to the fact that she had me. You know, she had me to be concerned about. She had me to put first. And you know, even I think it made her care and love for me was bigger than the care and love for herself.
Sure.
And sometimes that's where we are, right? Sometimes we do things for our children or someone that's important in our lives that's where our value system is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like sometimes our value system is not internal.
Sure.
And then as we get older, you know, even for me, my values has exponentially skyrocketed, and it's not based on, you know, how I look or what someone else is telling me, you know, I am. You know, it's really me just getting down to the core of like, how do I want to show up, and then what is the impact that I'm making, right? And you know, am I able to sit quiet? Am I able to do nothing and still enjoy those moments, as well as if I'm traveling to New York City, right? Like, what am I really made of? You know, and sometimes we don't get that until we get a little bit older.
Right.
And so even for that self-value talk, I really make it a point to pour into my children what I want them to have as their value, right? I
Sure.
think I think sometimes when we don't pour that value system into our children, the world can make up what that value proposition is, you know. And one of my big things that I always talk about is, especially for girls, a lot of people tell us, like, you know, we're priceless, right? Like this is like priceless thing. And then the next thing you know, you are thinking someone has really come into your life and done something amazing. But, you know, maybe you end up having sex with somebody over a chicken dinner. You know, maybe you have given someone your entire essence and they really haven't showed up for you because you don't even know what it's supposed to look like. So you don't even know if it's healthy or not. And everyone's going around telling you how priceless you are, right? So you have to really look at, like, what do you want for yourself? And does that person that's coming toward you, do they fit that? And if not, that's okay too, because you can choose. You don't have to choose what's coming to you. You can actually open up your essence, open up your heart to what you really want. I have women in tears at least 3 or 4 times a month, just from me simply asking them, what do they really want? Yeah. And these are grown women, you know, 40, sometimes 50, sometimes 25, 30 years old, who they say to me, no one has ever asked me, what do I really want?
Sure.
So most of us are operating off of just osmosis, or just, you know, responding to what's being presented to us. And we haven't really set with ourselves to really identify what is that. So then we get in these relationships and we get in these marriages, and then we say, oh, I'm not happy. Well, you're not happy because you never identified what you really want. And then you think that this person is supposed to bring you happiness, but you don't even know how to connect to it because you still never sat down and said, what do you really want? And so you have this partner going, well, what do you want from me? Right? What do you need me to do? I've done this, I've done that. And so they're keeping almost this invisible stack of cards, trying to level up to what you want. But we got to sit with ourselves, right? And sometimes it gets quiet. And one of my gifts for today, I would say, is remove the word lonely from your lingo. I mean, most of us, you know, we're born singular. You know, most of us are going to die solo. You know, we're like, even if you're next to somebody, you're dead. It's your individual experience. And life is not a lonely place. Like, we have made that word negative. Yeah. You know, are you feeling lonely when you watch those commercials that come on? You know, are you feeling lonely? And then the next thing, are you depressed? Right. And so anytime someone thinks about being alone, it is linked to mental illness or depression. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, it's a power space when you can sit alone, when you can sit in your queendom or your kingdom and say, you know, I can stand on my own 2 feet and I feel good about who I am. And then whoever's around me, whether it's my children or my mother, they just add to who I am, you know, or my spouse or a loved one, you know. And so that's like my gift, is like, start to look at some of the words we use and making sure that they're serving you and they're not like disarming you or belittling yourself.
Absolutely. But there's a lot in what the presentation that you just presented. Lonely and alone, two completely different things. Mm-hmm. Just before we went live, I mentioned to you that I relocated here to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm in the woods, and my son came to visit, and he knows that I'm a super social guy. I've been in the music business. I've always been in the center of everything and engaged with a lot of different conversations and people. And I sought peace and serenity. And so he came to visit me, and he said, look at where you're at. Aren't you lonely? Aren't you bored? And I understand he's 23. And at 23, all I wanted to do was go to the city and be a rock star, right? And now what I recognize is that I can find all sorts of fulfillment being alone. And that doesn't mean I'm lonely.
That's so good.
And that is empowering. And I think that, again, comes into value and worth. The conversation that you were just having about having people identify their worth and what their value is and what they bring to a relationship or to a parenting role. You also talked about roles being a really important thing to you. And I think one common denominator, I think, with people that I see struggling right now is their value was a loss of identity because they identified as the best mom or the best dad or the best, the best kid, the best partner. If your whole identity revolved around being that sort of the other half of a person's existence, then you don't fully get to live 100% of your own. And I really hear you communicating that to help people recognize what it is that they bring. So that's completely outside of being a single mom or a parent, but just value in terms of identity, right? So where did that come from for you? I'm interested to know. You mentioned that your mom may have valued your own needs more than her own. She left and then she came back. Now that is a situation that's way too common, and it's so sad to me, especially in relationships. It happens too often. So when she finally got you away, where did you start to recognize that your value and your worth was more than just, your mother's daughter or, the pretty girl that showed up in Oakland and got everybody's attention? Tell me a little bit about where you developed your values and your character.
Well, when we moved to the Bay Area, I was maybe about 4, maybe 5 years old. Okay. So I was young, but that's so interesting. That's a huge content. That's like a lot of context that you just gave right there. Even with, someone having an aesthetic look, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really know that I was attractive until I saw people's reaction to me. And I still didn't really know what to do with that. And then I think about 13, 14, people say, oh, you should be a model. And I'm like, a model? I don't even know. What does that mean? What does a model do? And so then I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I should be a model, She's like, okay, you want to be a model? So she put me in a school called Barbizon, School of Modeling.
Okay. And she to it right away?
I would say probably within a year. I think I brought it up to her enough to where she said, okay, well, let's try to figure out, well, what do you do when you want to be a model? She didn't know. She was in the dental industry. She didn't know what that meant. And how do we turn it into reality? And so I really ended up becoming a model. It was, I would call it a vision delayed, because the first time I went out to become a model, I was around 14, 15. I had gotten accepted to one of the local modeling agencies in San Francisco, which there really is a real modeling market in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I took the photos and all of these things, and everyone turned me down. I went to 3, there was only 3 modeling agencies. All 3 of them turned me down. Initially, I had one that was interested and they released me. That was the one who said, go take these photos with this photographer. And at the time, I really didn't know how to feel about it because I was so young, and it wasn't really like my dream. It was like something that other people were like, you should go do this.
Right.
And
so how can they turn me down? They said I was going to be a model.
I should do this, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because after that, I think some years went by, about 4 or 5 years. I go and I was 17 years old. And a friend of mine came up to me, and we're just walking, and he's like, you should become a playmate, a Playboy playmate. And I'm like, why would I become a Playboy playmate? Why would I do that?
You mentioned that?
Yeah, someone came up, they had a newspaper clip, and he's like, Playboy is auditioning models or people, just women. They're looking for, the millennial playmates. And I said, oh, I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, well, I'm 7. How old do you have to be? Right. So I'm looking and said, just be 18. Well, in 3 days, I was turning 18 inside of this happening. And the day that I went was the day after I turned 18 years old. Was to audition for Playboy for their millennial playmates. They were looking for 12 playmates all over the world. And I ended up becoming Miss July. And so it was so interesting because I call it, when you have a vision and something is supposed to be for you, if you're present, it will show up.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes when people start doing a lot of efforting, they're not believing, or they don't have that faith mechanism and that hope inside of them. and really building that muscle for like, these things that are for me will happen, right? I don't need to force them to happen. I didn't have to, like, when those 3 modeling agencies turned me down, I just continued going to school. You know, I didn't like try to hop on a plane and go to New York or anything like that. I just stayed doing what I was already doing, knowing that if this was for me, it would happen. Okay. And even when I went into the audition, I was actually a little nervous because it was the first time I had never modeled really in my life. And I remember it was at a hotel, and I walked up to the counter. I didn't tell anyone that I was going. So that was another no not to do.
Oh my gosh.
It was like, they'd taken out this really big article. It was like in the San Francisco Times or something. So I walk up to the hotel counter, you know, it probably was like, probably a nice hotel. It was a nice hotel, but I still walked up to the counter and said, I'm here for the Playboy audition. And the lady was like, oh, you have to take the elevator. And I was like, okay, so this is legitimate, right? So the front desk knows this is happening. And I remember when I walked in there, you know, I was fresh out of high school. I don't think I'd been out of high school for maybe a few months or something like that. Or it was very like 2 months, right? I had like on sweatpants and a hoodie. I had on my eyeglasses. I looked like a little kid, like a college kid, you know. And I remember all the girls were so dressed up. You know, they had like their breasts and they had their hair and they had their makeup on. I didn't know how to wear makeup. And I remember going in there like, oh my God, I am not dressed properly for this. And I remember this lady, her name was Marilyn Globowski. She and Arnie Faytag was my photographer that was there. And they were like, you're gorgeous. And I'm like, because I'm looking at all the girls in there. I'm like, these girls are like ready to model. Right. And they're like, we're exactly what we need. We're looking for the girl next door, because that was like their whole thing. They didn't want the made up, you know, Barbie doll. They wanted the girl next door, the girl who you could see that you grew up next to, who you were falling in love with. And then she just started to blossom and you have this big crush on her, and that's the girl next door. And so, you know, it's like fast forward, you know, it just totally shifted my world, you know, entering the world of Playboy, having a vision, having a dream, holding it, having that faith, having that hope. And then my mom taking that risk and moving us to a state, moving me somewhere where I could have those type of opportunities come knocking at my door. And then it was up to me to fulfill it.
Well, so, you know, that was a somewhat circuitous way, you know, kind of talking about that worth and the value. The fact that your mom recognized that, first of all, you expressed an interest in it. You know, some people mentioned you should be a model. You took their recommendations and you went after it a bit. Of course, it's fantastic that your mom supported that dream, or that at least that interest. When you went then forward with this audition for Playboy, and it's, you know, I picture, you know, this girl that shows up with her sweats, and all these other people are dressed to the nines, and had obviously sort of been familiar with what that audition process,
or even what Playboy was.
Right. Oh yeah. So you had no idea even that.
Not really. I didn't really understand it, you know. And even when I told my mom I got Playboy and the issue came out, she's like, "You're naked." I said, "Yeah."
Your mom did not know for the audition.
No.
Oh my gosh.
No, yeah. So she opened the magazine and she's like, "Oh my God, you're naked." I'm like, "This is Playboy." She said, "I didn't know what the hell it was." You know?
Oh my God. Well, you know, so I think about that. I mean, that was 22 years ago, right?
Yes.
And it's crazy because I thought you were 28, but either way. So the value that a lot of young women put on themselves now, right? Especially with the internet being so loaded with sexualization for women. You know, the Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, the OnlyFans type of environment for women at a young age. I really feel like the conversation needs to happen at parental ages for women and young men to recognize that what your sexuality presents is not your identity either. You know, you talked about being okay with being alone and who you are and what you value you bring. If someone's value is only that they bring an attractive body or a pretty face, as you know, it hasn't happened to you yet, but someday we all age out, right? And
Oh
especially in
yeah.
the industry, it's
I see my aging, even though I look young, I take care of myself, but we see it, we still see it.
and actresses, you hear amazing successful actresses like the Meryl Streeps and the Glenn Closes, the women that have had all these Oscars, and they talk about how you have to have something to stand on once the age process then takes
True.
away that extra leg up that you might have had. So amazing that your mom was supportive of it. It's very cute that you went in naive and that the organization was good to you. It sounds like, the fact that they picked
Yes.
you. And I've heard that from other women that have actually posed and been in the magazine, that they didn't have the negative experiences that some of the other industry has done for them.
It's true.
And there are opportunities, I would imagine, that has provided for you that went way beyond having to take your clothes off, right? So maybe tell me a little bit about how you got to take that identity and then extend it to make Neff somebody that was beyond somebody that was known for her looks.
Well, when Playboy, I feel like, first of all, so Playboy was really, to me, my experience with Playboy was there to really empower that woman that became a Playboy playmate. I'm not sure about the other, the girls who pose, because there's a difference. There's some girls who just pose for the magazine, and I don't really know that world. My world was definitely inside the Playboy playmate world, and we were really held in a container. We were held in a container of prestige, of really someone to aspire to, someone that people admired, and someone that was featured in a lot of opportunity. So we traveled the world. We were held to a certain level of criteria. We had to be media trained. We had to know how to walk, talk, chew gum, hold a conversation, communicate. We had to have personality. It really was a training ground of becoming a dynamic woman. That's how I look at Playboy. You really, if you're around playmates, you are going to be laughing. You will be entertained. You will be intrigued by her intelligence, her ability to hold a conversation, and also her ability to hold a space of class. Right. So they are, we're trained into that. So some of the girls may be a little bit older or a little bit younger, no matter what your background is or where you are, there's a certain way you had to show up because we were representing the brand, and Playboy is a brand of prestige. Right. So I don't know what's going on in the media. I don't even watch, those documentaries or anything. People are asking me. I'm like, I have no idea. That's not, I don't know what's happening in that world. I have so much going on in my own world that I can't get into something that happened, 80 years ago, or, I don't know, 50 years ago. I don't understand it because I wasn't even there. So I don't even know
your experience. And that's the thing. That's
all I know is my experience. And, I was granted a lot of access and a lot of opportunity to really see the world, to see the world, I never had a situation where I felt disrespected or any of that. And if anything, I always talk to, it's kind of funny, like if we were at an event or representing Playboy at a party, we had security all around us. If a guy tried to do anything or say anything, they would kick his ass out. They didn't care if he paid $10,000 to be in there.
Right.
And, he didn't get a warning. He was just getting lifted out of the mansion and put on the street. They didn't care who he was. And so it was really a thing where we were, highly regarded and highly protected. That was my experience as a playmate.
Sure.
With all companies and all industries, there's always, moments where you're like, oh, I wish we would have handled that better. But overall, I had a great experience, working with the company, working with the organization. That's actually was where I learned most of my concepts around business. We were working with some of the biggest brands in the world, all over the world, the biggest artists, the biggest athletes, the biggest talent. I learned how to, coordinate events, how to talk to talent, how to talk to, and manage groups of women. I mean, they would manage sometimes 100 women at a time and be putting on an event and handling the press and media training us. I mean, it was a very, very well-oiled engine, and make sure we got our checks, so we all, we got our checks, we got paid, to
absolutely
show up and do our job. So, it's definitely one of those things where, when you think about your life, or you think about like the steps you're going to take or where you're going to head, and, parents holding visions for their children, my mom listening to what I was saying about what I wanted to do, and investing her money. She was a real single mom. She did not have, any support from my father. I applaud my ex-husband. He's there 100% for our boys. My mom didn't have that experience.
Right.
And so, for her to say, I'm going to set aside funds to make sure my daughter has an opportunity opportunity to experience what she says she wants to achieve is huge. And I think sometimes as parents, and that's kind of in the art space, modeling is in the arts space. It's like a child that wants to be a musician, or that wants to paint, or that wants to be a chef. It's not traditional. It's not the, put me in a science camp, know.
Right.
And so I would just say, maybe to kind of sum that up, sometimes take that risk with your kid. It may not have been your pattern. It may not have been your path, but that's okay. We're the vessel for our children. They're not here to fulfill our dreams.
Right.
We're a vessel for them. To us, they belong to us, but really once you birth them, they belong to the world. Right? They're here to have their own experience. I mean, they really are. And if you come at life like that, the sky's the limit for them, And so that's what I would say to any parent, just like, let the sky be the limit for your child, and watching them have their experience will really take the cap off of your own life.
I do see that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
With your boys and the age that they're in, have you had that conversation about what the experience with Playboy brought you in terms of being able to open your life up, getting yourself out in the world and discovering things about business and empowering you as a strong, independent woman?
I have so many different types of conversations with my kids.
But
I think one of the largest conversations I have with my children is that you got to go get it.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Bay Area in Oakland. It's a very urban area. I'm walking across the street from school. We got drug dealers on one end, we got prostitution on another. Yeah. I grew up in a very real environment. It was fast paced, so, don't have your cell phone in your hand when you're walking down the street. Don't have your hands in your pockets. You have to protect the women that are around you, so I have different, because they're not growing up the way I grew up. Right. So, but the way I grew up, it has allowed me, I have different senses than other people. Like, even when I'm with people, they're like, wow, how did you see that? I'm like, I see everything. When you grow up in an urban city, you see what everybody else doesn't see. And so I really instill that in my kids, like, hey, let's be aware, if you want to achieve something, what are you going to sacrifice in order to get there? Life can't look exactly the same for you to get to what you want. So I'm a little bit rough with my kids. Plus I have boys, so I communicate with them a little bit differently. I don't necessarily, so they were around Playboy quite a bit actually as well. So they know a lot of the girls. They were little though, yeah. And they would go to the mansion. Hef was alive at the time. And so they got to see some of the world of fantasy, and they also get to see the world of business, because I would take them to events and I would take them behind the scenes. When I was a Playmate dancer, they would, be there present, knowing that mom is rehearsing for 4 days a week for 3 hours a day. And then I'm going to perform and be out of town for 2 weeks and be on the road, so they understand some work ethic. But I think that's probably a lot of parents nowadays are like, the kids, they just see the lights come on. They don't really know sometimes all the underbelly of how this happen, Yeah.
Those conversations I've had with my boys, it's funny. My oldest is a musician. He's a hip hop artist, amazing drummer.
Oh, wow.
But the funny thing was, as he started really getting into music and he wanted to play shows, he was kind of surprised that, wait, I thought I was gonna have limos for my gigs or getting flown to these shows. And of course, that just happened. He was his first gig. I remember him coming back and saying, "Dad, we only made like 125 bucks a piece." And I said, "Wait a minute, you're not supposed
to got paid. First of all, you got paid,
right? Yeah, and you played a weekend night. This is just not even fair." But but a lot of that too is the exposure they have to the internet, right? Not just what they might have observed from me, but their perception is not necessarily reality, right? So
it's not.
But I think when you talked about the relationship that you had with the boy's father in the last conversation that we had, it was really fascinating to me that the roles that you talked about playing with you as their mother and their father being what they see as the way to show up in the world as a man was really remarkable, because a lot of kids unfortunately grown up in broken homes and they don't have strong role models in one side of the parent or another, right? One parent will have resentments or they play the victim, and whatever happened in the relationship prior to the dissolution of the relationship was somehow done to them, right? And that victim mentality really molds what your kids see as adult behavior. And it's a cyclical pattern that I see really being damaging. And we didn't get into that much before about the damage you can do, with as a parent. I loved the fact that you talked about the power and the empowerment that you can do with positive role modeling. So maybe talk to me about conversations you have with parents in establishing those positive role models moving forward.
Definitely. Wow. I mean, it's beautiful when we grow up with examples, right? And that's a great thing. But some of us don't have those examples, just how to even hold a conversation, right? How to communicate, how to apologize, and then how to shift our energy so that the person that we apologize to actually sees a transformation and they see the effort, right? Or communicating that we're aligning ourselves to be in a position to make an effort, right? Like having those conversations. And so when I talk to parents about making sure that you're having these open lines of communications with your children, especially as they get older. I mean, kids are really highly intelligent, right? They see everything, even though we think that sometimes they don't. We want to start having real straightforward conversations with our children and just checking in, mom apologizes, or, we apologize, even coming together and saying, we didn't make the right choice on that. We didn't make the right decision. Let's figure out how we can do this together. Even bringing your kids on in on decision making, giving them more responsibility. A lot of times we want our kids to be responsible, but they don't have any real core responsibilities, right? And letting them fail, right? And it's letting them see the humanity in us. When we fail, when we don't do things that we should have done, or when we overreact, or when we respond to something the way that we shouldn't have. And then acknowledging how we can clean that up, how we can make those things better, and not just sweeping it under the rug, because those things come back and bite you when your kids turn 25 and 30, or they have their own families. You're going to end up dealing with those things in some way, or they're going to keep that same transition over to their children. And we don't want that.
Right.
So I think really making sure you're reading books, taking classes, educating yourself. What type of parent do you really want to be? If your kids were talking about you, what would you want them to say? How would you, even asking your kids, how do you know that mom cares about you? How do you know that I love you? What does love mean to your kids? Right. So I really ask my kids that quite a bit. What does love mean to them? Because people can manipulate what love is. Right. It could be, you could be thinking that love is actually if I don't feel negative, or if I don't feel confused, then this person doesn't love me. Right. If I'm not in worry, or if I'm not in concern for their well-being, then this person doesn't love me. Right. So sometimes when things are very calm, people think that there's dysfunction there when it's calm, when it should really be the opposite, right? So making sure that when we say certain things to our kids, I apologize, right? So what does that mean? How do we connect the dots so that our child sees what an apology sounds like, but also what does it look like, right? Because if I continue the same behavior pattern, that apology starts to go into the garbage can, right? Yeah. And then your word is being diluted, right? So I really work on my kids with like, when you say something, your word is who you become, right? So I have to also look at, when I say something to them, how do you know that I show up for you? How would you feel like, for instance, if I keep saying, hey, I'm going to come pick you up from after school at 3:00. And if I just don't show up, if I don't show up another day and I don't show up another day, would you believe in my word? And then I bring that over to them. Well, you said you were going to clean up your room without mom needing to tell you what to do. Are you a young man that knows what he needs to do? Or are you a child that needs to be told what to do by his mommy? Right? And they're like, no, I'm a young man. I'm like, okay, show me that. Because you're remember that example I gave you about me not picking you? If I just didn't pick you up from school, but I keep calling you and saying I'm on my way, but I never show up. Right. And I'm like, how would that make you feel? Right. So it's like, how would that make you feel? So I think sometimes we go into examples and we don't go into the feeling and the heart. Sure. And how does that make you feel? That would make me feel sad. Right. The mom hurt your feelings, even talking to our partners, our spouses, or for blending families, everyone get on the same accord about, every child can't be parented the same way. Some children have more sensitivity, some don't, or some are just they're introverts. My eldest son he's an introvert, so he may not show his emotion the same way that my younger one does. And so I think it's so layered when we think about parenting or getting on the same page, or the side of things that don't necessarily look empowered, right? How do we learn through that so that we can get to the end of the rainbow and not look at it like we got to get it all right today? Right. Like showing our children, like, I'm a work in progress and I want you to hold me accountable. Let mom know if I said I'm going to do something and then I'm not, like, you can call me out on it. Right. Like you see things that maybe I don't see, or maybe I'm still maturing in an area. Yeah, I'm grown and I'm your mama, but I still have childlike behavior in some areas of my life. Right. So I think just like showing our kids, like, we're human too. Yeah. Right. And letting them know, like, I'm open to having some correction from my ex-husband, from my mother, from my sister, from my kids. It's like, show me the blind spot. Yeah. Don't let me walk around in life blind and everyone's just thinking I got it together. It's like, but we have to be humble. If we want that correction, if we want that coaching. And sometimes our greatest teachers are our children.
Oh, so much so. That really is a vulnerable place to be, to allow yourself the gift of having them point out some of those things to you. You talked about apologies and acknowledging where we have growth to do. So many times I recognize adults have a difficult time acknowledging those things because they lose some power, right? Their ego wouldn't allow them to hold their vulnerability forward. And I see it especially through social media. I think you and I both are on social media a lot. And in a place that you engage and you interact with people quite a bit, I know that for me, the most empowering thing was to acknowledge some shortcomings that I had and be okay with them, to be all right that, I'm not perfect, and recognize that the stuff that I need work on it's a human trait, and hopefully I don't repeat those kind of things. The thing that I want to do is make sure that all of those things don't ever cause pain to somebody else. Right.
Right.
But I was going to ask you, there's a TV show that was a series on Netflix that came out between the time you and I talked last called Made. Have you seen this show?
Oh my goodness. I watched a few episodes of the show. It was a little bit too depressing for me.
It's dark.
Yeah, it was a little bit too much for me because I've experienced not necessarily firsthand exactly what she's experiencing, but there are certain things that were just a little bit too triggering for me. And even just because I work with a lot of women.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I was like, okay, I think I got the gist of the show. I think I watched about 3 episodes, but yeah, definitely. I know I'm a familiar.
The thing that I really thought was impressive about it, it was so well done because it was the situation for so many women out there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about that when you mentioned that your mom went back with you.
Yes.
And the amount of times that people would go back to a situation that was so toxic and so negative. When you watch that show, objectively, you're thinking, how could you go back? It's so bad. And yet people do it all the time. Relationships, whether they have children or not, their value in themselves does not allow them the strength to go out and themselves the strength to go out there and find their worth outside. All of a sudden their value became being a punching bag, for that partner. It's really, it is triggering and it's awful. And at the same time, I felt like I needed to see it to understand and not to spoil it, but it does come through in a really empowering and beautiful way at the end. And I could relate to a lot of it. I had someone close to me watch it that I knew had a situation like that, and she couldn't get through it either. And having seen the series, I thought it's important for people to see that you can get past to the other point and the other side of things. You can get to the point where you can value yourself enough and your children enough to move past that lack of value for yourself. You had made a comment about that in our last conversation.
Yeah.
That some of the women that come to you, they're so, I think you said that they couldn't see their way out of a wet paper bag with a flashlight. And many people are sort of struggling with that. That life is so, their blinders are on. Life is so difficult. It's right here. And all one might need to do is just let those blinders up a little bit, just get past the other side of that paper bag with their flashlight and realize that the whole world is available to them. It sounds to me like that was the transition that you took people from Single Moms Planet to your foundation. And so maybe talk to me a little bit about the foundation and also what event, because you've got a big event happening this time every year. And so tell me a little bit about the event.
No, absolutely. And to comment a little bit about what you just said, we're animals. So I think sometimes we forget this. We're creatures of habit and we are creatures of community. And even if the community that you know is dysfunctional, sometimes it feels safer than what you don't know.
Right.
Right. And so it is very risky. It's very scary to, even if you have a roof over your head and lights and food, and even if it's scarce, to go out and venture alone, especially with children. Right. It's very vulnerable. It's real out there on the street. And so if you don't have anyone to turn to, you don't have that foundation, you don't have a parent that's mentally or physically or financially intact to take you back in with your kids now. Right. It can be very daunting. Right. My mom had the support of my great aunt and her cousins and all these people and family. My grandfather came and got my mom and I and brought us to Oakland, California. You know what I mean? So it's one of those divine experiences. I have a great support system with my ex-husband and my mom and my sister. A lot of people don't have that. And so when you think about the show like The Maid, she really didn't have anyone. Right. She really didn't. Right. And I think we need to really take a hold of the humanity of that. Like there's some people who just don't have anyone.
Sure.
And even the woman who hired her, people instantly judge. They instantly think that they're not looking at how they can help. They're just looking at you as someone doing a task or doing a job. They're not looking at you as you're my responsibility in this humanity thing that we got going here. Right. And so that's what Single Moms Planet is. We're that responsibility factor in the humanity. We stand in the gap for the woman that didn't have the support system that my mother had, or that doesn't have the support system that I have, right? That's where we come in, and we're a family-driven organization, and we really, you know, we're never judging, and we've heard so many different types of scenarios that we're able to really kind of cut through what's really going on here. And a lot of times it's just based out of fear, you know, and sometimes it is based out of self-value. That's true. But it could be triggered from generations of, you know, abuse or drug abuse, or just not knowing what to do next, right? So some of us need to be told what to do next until we can stand on our own 2 feet and can see what to do next, right? But we have to be around people who are safe and who care about us, who can see a bigger future for us to guide us through those steps, right? And so that is where we come in. You know, we have counseling community. We guide mothers. A lot of our mothers who are attracted to us, they're entrepreneurs, they're women executives, they're women who are starting businesses and corporations. And so a lot of those women come to us wanting to grow their businesses, wanting to grow their financial literacy. And so our big organizational, you know, foundation is around women in business and financial education. And then from there, women are able to pay it forward. You know, a lot of those same women, they go out, they've hired some of the women, they travel together, they start corporations together, and they really build that community around each other. And every year, especially around this time of the year, we're always looking for people who want to give back to the organization through adopting families. And so we adopt families for the holidays. And even if you're going, whoa, Christmas is in a couple of days, you know, a lot of these families, they're still needing that support for the next month, right? So all the way from December, the gas bills are up. You know, even my gas bill went up. I was like, oh, okay, $150. You know, normal is like $30. And I was laughing. I said, you know, thank God that I can pay that bill. But there's some people who are really, they have to keep their family warm, and they don't have the funds, right? There's real situations going on right now. So we are taking donations for anyone that wants to adopt a family. Typically, we adopt families for $250 per family. And that allows us to help with any essential emergency bills, anything that is going on as far as like, you know, not just like gifts, like necessarily like toys, but if they want toys, or if their kids need essentials, diapers, baby formula, you know, warmer clothes for the winter. That's where we step in. We really do it case by case. We take on about 25 moms every winter, and we really make sure that those moms have what they need.
That's beautiful. And if they wanted to make those donations and be able to help sort of sponsor those moms, they can go to singlemomsplanet.org and go. I saw that there's a donate section there, and it lists the programs there. I know that you've got your awards gala where you recognize women that have been able to transition and get back to the community. So the holidays, especially, this is the time right now. If somebody wanted and had the facilities and the ability to do something, maybe helping sponsor a family might be the best option at this point.
It's a great thing because we still are being very respectful of COVID. Right. So even though, you know, a lot of families are not experiencing that, possibly, there's still people who are. And so we're being respectful of that too. We aren't really doing a lot of big gatherings how we've done in the past. So that's why we're really pinpointing the key families that we know in our community that could use the support. And there are families who are looking at, you know, how are they progressing? Maybe they just started a new job, or maybe they're transitioning out of an old one, looking for a new one. So we follow our families. We really make sure that, you know, the women who we vet them, you know, they're not popping out of nowhere. They've been a part of our community. They've come to our events. They've been a part of our counseling programs. And so these are women who we know, like, they are, you know, checking in with us, giving us updates. You know, they write us emails saying, you know, hey, Neferteri, I got a job. And maybe they hadn't worked in 6 months. So even though a woman may have a job, she may have been really she's treading water a lot of the times, you know, and she's trying to plug the boat up, and, you know, her credit's gotten messed up. So she couldn't really find a new place to live. So all of these things, it's almost like this, you know, how they have that little ball, like the grass keeps building as it rolls down the hill. Right. You know, it's like, okay, you know, how do we stop the bleeding? You know, and sometimes sometimes it's that one thing, and sometimes it's the community. And so that's what Single Moms Planet is. We're that community. and we're educational, but we also like to step in, really support during the holidays, because it can be a little extra pressure added, and we want to alleviate that in any way that we can.
It's incredible. The idea of having community, it goes back to what I talked about, that people are sort of struggling more during this time of year. Families that may have had whatever disconnect, if they're away from each other, the feeling like you don't have anybody else that's in your corner. For you to be an advocate for these women, I think is a beautiful thing. I love the idea that once you vet them, a lot of those women you mentioned have sort of then paid it forward, and they've gotten involved in the organization, and then they develop the financial literacy that you talked about. They have the education to be able to right that ship. And once they patch the boat and they get ahead, and then they can transition and help sort of stop the bleeding with somebody else. That's the kind of community support that we need across the board, whether you're a single mom or for me, looking at the houseless, people that have struggled with homelessness in different areas, it breaks my heart. And there's a lot of judgment about that community. I noticed in certain places that they think that people that are on the streets are just either looking for a handout or they don't want to work. And
that's not true.
There are so many people that are struggling with mental illness and physical disabilities that they can't work. And, as a community, we really do need to get behind those people. I think, again, talking about that phone number, and I just want to point it out again. I'll put it up here on
Please do.
The captions. The fact that somebody might feel like they're struggling and they don't have somebody that will listen to what they're going through. If you don't have somebody directly in front of you, this number, 988, that crisis line is put together like the people that are there at Single Moms Planet, that they've been there before, they've been trained to be able to listen, and they want to help you. And so I would hope that anybody that goes through any challenges during this holiday season or any time, they know that if they don't feel like they have somebody in their life that they can call this phone number. And it's 24 hours. It's anonymous. There's no judgment out there. You're not going to be put on some kind of phone list. They're there to help. And it sounds to me like that's certainly what you've done with Single Moms Planet.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed, Neff, by what you've done. I love the fact that you've been able to share this empowerment with your kids too. As a father of two boys, I recognize that there's a small window you have to make an impact and an influence before they stop listening and they just watch, right? And for me, I'm grateful. My two sons, I got to spend some time with them in Oregon last week, and watching them grow at 21 and 23, they did point out a lot of things to me that I needed to hear. I got a lot of growth out of it. And even the fact that your boys are a year and a half older than the last time you and I talked, I'm sure you've seen a lifetime of changes and transition, because now they're full on puberty. Life becomes so confusing. Nothing makes sense when you're that age. At 15, the world is so messed up. And so I'm glad. No matter how well adjusted you are, there's a part of your frontal lobe that's not developed, and I know boys and girls both at that age, and they're just inundated with so much out there on the web. I sound so old talking like this, but I think
it's a great conversation, though. I think sometimes you're right. The frontal lobes are not developed. Like, there's so many things going on. They have access to way more content and data and information than we do. And they're just figuring it out. They're learning how to communicate with us, how to, listen for, if we're going to overreact. That's a huge thing for us. It's like, be honest. Let's not overreact. Mom's not going to overreact. Dad's not going to overreact. We both worked on that. Let's listen, to what it is, but we're going to hold you accountable. Everyone needs to be held accountable. Parents, grandparents, kids. You can't just point the finger. It's that time where we're seeing, people feeling like they don't have anyone to reach out to. They're saying enough is enough, and they're taking matters into their own hands. And so we really want to be sensitive to that, and just, look at, not necessarily what did we all do wrong? Because sometimes if we're like, what did I do wrong? You know, we want to be like, okay, let's look at what can we do right moving forward.
Yes.
You know,
so many positive nuggets right there. I think that's beautiful. So you're going into the Christmas season now.
Yes.
The boy's father is very much a part of their life. You
Yeah.
mentioned they're with him a lot. Sports was a big thing, if I remember right. Baseball was a deal.
Baseball, yeah.
So as Christmas goes, and I'm just going to leave you with this. I think one thing that I've noticed about friends of mine that have sort of split families, right? They're for whatever reason, their relationships didn't work out. And Christmas is a time where a lot of kids see their parents for what they might be getting or not getting for Christmas presents, or showing that that's the most important part, is the transactional part of a holiday season and not so much the spirit. So how are you balancing that with your boys right now, where they're with their dad a lot, and are you able to spend time where they feel like both parents have gotten?
Oh, definitely. So our youngest, he is still with, so I have him, so technically he's with me like every other day, but we have been slowly transitioning him because we agreed even when we were divorcing that as the boys were like 13 plus, that they would primarily live with him because he needs to have his hand on them a lot more. And so, you know, he's slowly transitioning, but they're with me. I see them or talk to them. My eldest son calls me every day. Even like yesterday, I was like, this boy called me like 13 times yesterday, you know. I saw them last night. You know, I see them a lot. We live like 10 minutes away from each other. So we're really close. And, you know, sometimes I may take them to school, or, you know, when they have their games, I'm at their games, and they play baseball quite a bit. So we just find ways that it just naturally happens. You know, I think sometimes when you're thinking like it needs to look like this, it's like, if you're family, you're family. You know, I'll go over to their dad's house and I'm like, what's going on in his bedroom? You know, clean this damn closet up, you know. And he's messaging me. He's like, thank you for managing 2 households, you know. So really, you know, I'm like, you know, no disrespect to, you know, what he has going on, and no disrespect for what, but we have to, this is a parenting situation. You know, it can't be what's happening in my house is my business, and what's happening at your house is your business, because that comes over into my home, and how I handle them comes over into his home. Sure. Right. So it really is, you know, it's a community. You know, we're like, let's get this right. We only have a couple more years left, you know. Yes. Set these egos to the side. You know, are you boys cleaning up over there? You know, they get in my car. If I go pick them up, I'm like, did you do all your chores? I'm like, get your ass back in that house. Yes. Do your chores. Like, I'll come back. You know, I'll go run an errand or something. It's like, you're not getting away with anything, you know, and that's how we run it. You know, we run it like a team. And so even for the holidays and, you know, Christmas and things like that, or birthdays, a lot of the times we combine our funds to get them things together as a family. We don't really like say, this is from dad or this is from mom. We'll do things together, or look at, especially if they've gotten older, it's like, okay, what do they need or what do they want? Or if my eldest son said he wants to go to Big Bear, you know, so we would more so have an adventure together versus like a gift. Yeah. And so we look at different things, and I would say year after year it shifts, you know, depending upon what's happening with the family. But you know, we're not. My ex, he likes to do a lot of community service with them, so he like takes them to go feeding the homeless, and they go to downtown LA to Skid Row. He does that with them about 4 to 5 times a year. And then the schools that they go to are big on community service. They go to Catholic schools, so they can't graduate from those schools unless they have certain hours of community service. So, you know, we really even though we're not together in a relationship of like he and I being together, we still have a relationship. Yeah. You know, and our main goal is to make sure the kids are healthy, happy, whole, complete, you know, citizens that actually add value to the world.
I picture, Neff, that your friends that observe the relationship you have with the children's father is so A, envious, B, resentful that
I've heard that.
but I have it too. Honestly, the mother of my kids and I are best friends. We were childhood sweethearts.
I love it.
And we have to, I mean, for the sake of the kids, of course, it would be much more difficult. And you see relationships that are challenged that way because one parent has resentment towards the other one, and it carries through to the relationship that they have with the kids. They talk about the other parent, and to me, it's so damaging. It's so much easier if there's a relationship that's good communication and respect and trust for each other. But I just pictured Neff coming over and picking up the kids and saying, "Did you clean up your room? Nope. Get your ass back in." I picture,
It's true, yeah.
their father going, oh, "Okay, yeah." Some parents might feel that judged. They might be insecure about it. They could, well, okay, obviously, I need to be better at, being a disciplinarian for them to clean up after their stuff. The fact that you sound like you communicate with each other very well about it's for the kids. This is not me trying to run your house or manage your household, but ultimately it's showing them how to show up as a community member, as a member of society, as a contributing member of the family. The community service part, I love knowing that about their relationship with the kids. I think every child should know how to give back to the service in the community.
Yes.
I mean, that's my judgment, but I feel like if we all had the ability to do that, I think we'd be a lot more tolerant and compassionate, society.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
I'm excited to see the development of your kids. I don't even know your boys, but just the fact that they've had this kind of coaching along the way, I have no doubt at all they're going to be fascinating, amazing contributors to society. So I applaud you. And
oh, thank you. I've come a long way, our co-parenting and, just maturity level as adults, right? So we're talking about sometimes you have kids, you're still growing up.
Oh yeah.
There's lessons you didn't get from your own parents, because they didn't get them from their parents, right? And some things we just missed, some things we're hard-headed with. And so, there's a part of my ex-husband that has grown me. He still, to me, is someone that I look to for guidance, right? He's the man of our house. He's the man of our family, period. Yeah. Even me being in a relationship, or if I get married again, which I plan to get married again, he's still the foundation for the core family that I have at the beginning, which is with my kids. And so that is to be respected and honored and cherished, because not everyone has that.
It's true.
And I think that, that's the role and the gift that I give to him, to give him that honor and that respect, and to show my children, because I want them as boys and as men, when they grow up, to also attract that, and the woman or the partner that they actually attract as well.
Yeah. So. It's even a really great thing for the relationship that you have now, for them to see the way that the relationship that you had with their father and the boys can be so healthy that way, because it really does. It's a cycle effect. And if your partner right now has children of their own from a previous relationship, all of those things, carry on. So
it does. That's a whole nother topic. People who the step parent or the partner that's coming in, and there's already a nucleus. Right. How do you be supportive of that? How do you let that child? I mean, we could have a whole nother call. How do you let that child know that you're there, but I'm not taking your mom's spot. I'm not taking your dad's spot. Right. I'm just here, I'm a part of the team too, I'm here, but I'm not trying to, shift something, there's so many dynamics, and a lot of step parents, don't necessarily get the applause that they should too.
Sure.
There's a lot of mental things that go on when you have kids, and those kids leave your presence, and then it's you and your new family or your new partner. And, things that are not said that the kids don't know, things that, could be messing inside of the new relationship you're forming as well. So, it's so layered and it's so deep that we just want to be kind to each other. You know, yeah.
Yeah. That's what this whole conversation is about, being able to pay that forward and be positive and contribute to those people. The best thing you can do is just help build somebody else up so that, you can stand strong yourself. It's funny that two things. I didn't get a chance to mention this before the podcast, but there's a tremendous organization. There is a woman who has this organization, started in the medical field, Sassy Badge, sassybadge.com. Puts together these really cool and funky badges of all sorts of unique designs. I'm a huge elephant fan, so I actually got this one. But if you go to sassybadge.com, there's a variety of different badges that you can get for. So if you've got a badge and you're in the medical field or you're a teacher or anything like that, you wear these badges. You can bling yourself out a little bit. But she's someone that I've been talking to about building through the adversity. So she gave me her stack of little memes that she printed out. And the first one I picked up when I was starting the conversation with you says, how do you pick yourself back up? Confidently, deliberately, decisively, without shame. You forgive yourself in full. You believe in your ability to break cycles that used to hold you hostage. So that, to me, exemplifies what you've been able to help people recognize in Single Moms Planet. I applaud you for the work that you've done, and I welcome anyone to find out more information by going to singlemomsplanet.org. And if they want to find out what made this incredibly dynamic, beautiful woman who she is, you can go to neferteriplessy.com. And
Thank you.
are you on a speaking circuit right now? Are you out on a community circuit?
No, I'm not. I typically, people contact me to speak or do online events or conferences, but I am looking to do a lot of different things in 2023 with my personal career. Now that my boys are older, I have more space, I have more time on my hands. I'm actually going to start doing more television hosting. I'm going to get back into some acting things as well. So nice. I have some things brewing, start producing some television shows again, things like that. Yeah. So nice. I'm excited.
Yeah. Anything you can talk about, or is it under wraps?
It is, one of the things that I started doing just in the last 4 weeks is I brokered a contract deal with LA Weekly, which is a publication where I write their articles, and I also am doing their red carpet events, going and interviewing the talent and things like that. And so that is my first segue back into the media space beyond, the organization or, doing kind of the local events. So now I am looking to kind of get back out there again and really just bring my career, we were talking about earlier, when you're here to do something, I'm going to take everything that I have as far as, my expertise in the co-parenting space and helping single parents really bridge the gap to success. And then taking all the things that I've really been helping people with, building their companies and their brands, and then bringing that into becoming an expert in the television world.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you're certainly gifted with that too. You're a wonderful communicator, and you are the authenticity behind what you say is so prevalent. It's gorgeous. So you are a wonderful human being.
Thank you.
I wish you a Merry Christmas. And folks, if you came here late and you did not know, you can both check out a previous episode if you go to accesskevin.com and search for Neferteri Plessy. You can see the conversation we had a year and a half ago. And you can also find out a little bit more about what Nef's doing with Single Moms Planet. If you've not done so, please subscribe to this channel. You can go to youtube.com/@accesskevin. It's not quite LA Weekly or Red Carpet, but it'll do.
So, very similar. It's going to be, yeah.
I really do want to thank you so much. And thanks to Carlos for putting this together. Nef, Merry Christmas to you and your family. And I wish you the best and success in all you do.
Thank you. And tell Sassy Badge she should reach out to event coordinators to use her clips as well.
I will do that.
Conferences, I produce events that have 10,000 people there. So
beautiful.
You could sell those things in droves.
Sounds good. All right. I'll let you know.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have a beautiful evening.
Okay. You too. Bye.